complaint about?
Complaint is about sound application. Complaint about disturbing somebody's peace.
Yeah, that's
That's
been
what I deal with.
yeah, that's been ruled on.
No, don't give her the law.
Step back or you're getting detained now. The officer's hand snaps toward his cuffs, but the pastor doesn't move an inch. Right outside a packed neighborhood church, Pastor Daniel stands in the doorway as 3 officers try to push past him. Phones are already up, recording. The entire street feels like it's holding its breath. They're accusing him, loudly, of hiding money and running illegal activity inside his own church. No warrant, no proof, just pressure in front of everyone he leads. But instead of backing down, Pastor Daniel calmly raises his voice, quoting the law word for word, and suddenly, the officers hesitate. Then one of them points behind the crowd and says, "We've got a witness," and that's when the pastor's expression changes. Before we go anywhere further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The crowd parts just enough for everyone to see who the officer is pointing at. Deacon Lewis steps forward slowly, hands clasped like he's been waiting for this moment, but his eyes don't meet Pastor Daniel's. For a split second, something unspoken passes between them. Recognition. Not surprise, recognition. "Go ahead," Officer Briggs says, gesturing toward Lewis. "Tell him what you told us." The air tightens. Lewis clears his throat, glancing at the officers before speaking. I've seen things. Money moving in ways that didn't make sense. Large amounts. No proper records." A ripple moves through the crowd. These aren't strangers. These are people who've trusted Pastor Daniel for years. Now they're hearing something that doesn't fit. Pastor Daniel doesn't interrupt. He doesn't raise his voice. But the calm on his face hardens just slightly. "Deacon Lewis," he says quietly, "you've had full access to our financial meetings. Every record, every audit." Lewis shifts his weight. "That doesn't mean everything is clean." Officer Briggs steps in again, louder this time, feeding off the tension. "That's enough. We have reasonable suspicion. Step aside, Pastor." But Pastor Daniel doesn't move. Instead, he takes one slow step forward, closer to the officers, not away. "No warrant," he says clearly. "No entry." That hasn't changed. The crowd is no longer just watching, they're choosing sides. Phones are raised higher. Whispers grow louder. The pressure is no longer just on the pastor, it's on everyone. And then Pastor Daniel does something no one expects. He pulls out his phone and starts recording. "Since we're making accusations publicly," he says, eyes locked on Lewis, "let's make sure everything is on record." Lewis freezes, and Officer Briggs' expression shifts, just slightly. Because now, this isn't just an investigation anymore. It's exposure. And something about that makes them hesitate. Then Briggs leans in, voice low but sharp. "Last chance, Pastor, step aside." The moment Pastor Daniel doesn't move, the officers try anyway. Officer Briggs shifts his shoulder forward, attempting to step past him into the church. It's subtle, but deliberate. A test of dominance. Pastor Daniel lifts his hand, firm but controlled, stopping him at the threshold. "Don't," he says calmly. "This is private property. You don't cross that line without legal authority." The words land differently now. Not just resistance, precision. One of the younger officers glances at Briggs, uncertain. This isn't going the way they expected. Briggs exhales sharply, irritation rising. "Are you obstructing an active investigation?" Pastor Daniel doesn't flinch. "No, I'm asserting my rights and protecting theirs." He gestures behind him, toward the congregation gathered just inside the doorway. That hits the crowd. These aren't just spectators anymore. They're part of this. A woman near the front whispers, "He's right," while still filming. Another man steps closer, folding his arms, watching the officers carefully. The pressure begins to shift. Briggs tries to regain control, raising his voice. "We've received credible reports. Financial misconduct. Unauthorized gatherings. That gives us cause." Pastor Daniel tilts his head slightly. "Then present the documentation. Show me the warrant. Or the written complaint." Silence. A beat too long. The officers exchange quick glances. Nothing comes out. And that's when the first crack appears. From the edge of the crowd, Deacon Lewis steps closer, not fully beside the officers, but close enough. He leans toward Briggs, whispering something under his breath. Briggs listens, then gives a small nod. Pastor Daniel notices. His eyes track the movement, the alignment. Interesting, he says quietly. Briggs straightens up, louder now, performing for the growing audience. We have a witness willing to testify that funds have been mishandled. The words hit harder this time. A few people in the crowd turn their heads, looking at Pastor Daniel with something new. Doubt. Lewis shifts again, stepping just enough into view. Pastor Daniel's gaze locks onto him. Not angry, not shocked, focused. You're very confident today, Pastor Daniel says, voice steady. More than usual. Lewis doesn't respond. Briggs takes a step forward again, pushing the moment. Step aside, Pastor, or we secure the premises. But this time, Pastor Daniel doesn't just block him. He plants his feet. You keep saying that, he replies, calm but unyielding. But you haven't told anyone here under what law. The crowd quiets again. Now they're listening closely. Because for the first time, the officers don't have an answer. Briggs' jaw tightens. And then he raises his voice just enough for everyone to hear. We have a witness who says you've been hiding money. The words echo across the street. And suddenly, the crowd isn't just watching anymore. They're questioning him. The word money hangs in the air like a stain that won't wash off. You can feel it shift the crowd. Just seconds ago, they were backing Pastor Daniel. Now, people are glancing at each other, whispering, trying to make sense of something that doesn't fit. Pastor Daniel notices it immediately. Not panic, not fear, awareness. He slowly turns his head, scanning the faces he knows. People he's counseled, helped, prayed with. And for the first time, there's distance in their eyes. Officer Briggs sees it too, and leans into it. That's right, he says, pointing again. A direct witness. Someone from inside. All eyes move to Deacon Lewis. Lewis steps forward again, but this time there's tension in his body. His shoulders are tight. His voice, when it comes, is quieter than before. I didn't want it to come to this, he says. But I've seen irregular transfers. Money moving late at night. Accounts that don't match what we're told. A woman in the crowd gasps softly. Pastor Daniel finally speaks, his tone still controlled, but sharper now. Are you making that statement as a formal accusation? Lewis hesitates, just for a fraction of a second. But it's enough. Pastor Daniel steps slightly closer, not aggressive, but direct. Because that matters, Lewis. Words like that don't just float. They carry consequences. Officer Briggs cuts in quickly, sensing the shift. We're not here to debate technicalities. We're here to verify. Then verify the right way. Pastor Daniel replies instantly. You request access. You present cause. You follow procedure. Briggs shakes his head. Or you cooperate voluntarily. There it is. The pressure. The trap. Pastor Daniel doesn't fall into it. No, he says simply. Not without legal grounds. A ripple runs through the officers. This isn't resistance. They're used to that. This is control. And it's slipping from them. Then Pastor Daniel reaches into his pocket again. But this time, instead of just recording, he lifts the phone higher, making it visible to everyone. I want this clear, he says, voice steady, projecting now. You're attempting to enter private property based on an unverified claim, without presenting legal authority. Now the pressure flips. The crowd leans in. Phones rise higher. Officer Briggs' expression tightens. Because now, he's the one being watched. Pastor Daniel turns his head slowly, locking eyes with Deacon Lewis. And then he asks, calm but cutting, you filed that report, didn't you? Lewis doesn't answer. He just stands there, frozen. Silence spreads through the crowd, and this time, it's heavier. Deacon Lewis doesn't respond. He doesn't deny it. He doesn't confirm it. He just stands there, eyes drifting anywhere but toward Pastor Daniel. And that silence says more than anything else. Pastor Daniel takes a slow breath, then speaks, not to the officers, but to Lewis. 2 weeks ago, he says, voice steady. You asked for access to the financial system outside of our scheduled review. Lewis shifts uncomfortably. You said it was for efficiency, Pastor continues. Then last week, you questioned figures that were already audited, publicly, in front of the board. Murmurs ripple through the congregation. People remember that meeting. Pastor Daniel takes one more step forward. And now this. Officer Briggs steps in, trying to break the momentum. That's enough. We're not here for internal disputes. We're here to investigate potential criminal activity. Then investigate properly. Pastor Daniel replies immediately. Because right now, you're acting on something that doesn't add up. Briggs' patience snaps. He turns to his officers. Prepare to enter. One of the younger officers hesitates. Sir, we don't have. I said prepare. Briggs cuts him off. That's the breaking point. Pastor Daniel raises his voice, not shouting, but sharp enough to cut through everything. You enter that building without a warrant, and you violate the law. Plain and simple. The words hit hard. Now the crowd isn't divided anymore. They're alert. A senior member of the church, an older man who's been silent until now, steps forward beside Pastor Daniel. He's right, he says firmly. You don't get to walk in here like that. More voices begin to rise in agreement. The pressure flips completely. Officer Briggs looks around, and for the first time, he's outnumbered in more ways than one. Pastor Daniel lowers his voice again, calm but deliberate. I've already contacted legal counsel, he says. They're aware of what's happening here. Every second of it. That lands hard. Then he adds one more piece, quiet but precise. And every access point to our financial system is logged. Every login, every attempt. Deacon Lewis' head snaps up, just slightly, but enough. Pastor Daniel doesn't take his eyes off him. If we pull those records right now, he continues, we'll see exactly who's been inside those accounts and what they tried to do. The implication settles over everyone. The officers, the crowd, and Lewis. Because suddenly, this isn't about suspicion anymore. It's about proof. Pastor Daniel pauses, just long enough for it to sink in, then says, so go ahead, let's check. Every head turns to Deacon Lewis. For a moment, no one moves. Then Pastor Daniel unlocks his phone and turns the screen outward. The system is cloud-based, he says, calm but firm. We can access the logs right now. One of the younger officers exchanges a look with Briggs, then steps closer. If that's true, he says carefully, we should verify. Briggs hesitates, but the crowd is watching too closely now. Backing out would look worse. Do it, he mutters. Pastor Daniel taps through a secure app, enters a code, and within seconds, a list of access logs fills the screen. Dates, times, user IDs. He hands the phone to the officer. Scroll, Pastor says. The officer does. His brow furrows. There, Pastor adds. Last Tuesday. After midnight. The officer pauses, then reads it again, slower. User, L. Lewis. A murmur explodes through the crowd. Deacon Lewis steps back instinctively. There's an explanation. Keep scrolling, Pastor Daniel says, voice steady. More entries appear. Multiple logins. Odd hours. Attempts flagged as unauthorized modification. The officer looks up at Briggs, uncertainty turning into realization. Sir, this wasn't reported in the complaint. Briggs' face tightens. The ground has shifted beneath him. Pastor Daniel finally turns to Lewis, the calm now edged with something deeper. You didn't just question the records, he says. You tried to change them, and when that failed, you tried to frame me. Lewis shakes his head, but the words don't come. The crowd has already decided. A woman near the front speaks up, voice breaking. Why would you do that? Lewis looks around. No allies left. I was trying to protect the church, he mutters weakly. No. Pastor Daniel replies quietly. You were trying to control it. The silence that follows is heavy, but clean. The truth has landed. Officer Briggs exhales, then straightens. We're standing down, he says louder now. This matter requires further review. It's not an apology, but it's a retreat. The officers step back from the entrance. The crowd parts, but this time, not in fear. In judgment. Lewis is no longer at the center of the church. He's outside of it. Within minutes, senior members quietly escort him away from the doorway. Not forcefully, but firmly. His role is over. Everyone understands it. Pastor Daniel watches, then turns back to the officers. You acted on a claim without verifying it, he says. That has consequences. Briggs nods once. Internal review will handle that. And just like that, the authority they came in with is gone. The cruisers leave slower than they arrived. No sirens. No urgency. Just silence. Pastor Daniel turns to his congregation, faces filled with relief, guilt, gratitude. I told you before, he says gently. Truth doesn't fear light. A few people nod. Some wipe their eyes. The tension that filled the street begins to dissolve. Then Pastor Daniel steps back into the church, holding the door open, not as a barrier anymore, as an invitation. And as he walks inside, head high, one thing is clear. The accusations didn't break him. They exposed the one who made them. And this time, everyone saw it.